Okay, so here I am in the EC2 instance part of the AWS console, and I'm going to go ahead and launch a new instance, and I'm going to use an Amazon Linux AMI. I'm going to go ahead and hit next. I'm going to change my VPC over to my VPC, and then I'm going to put this in my basically into my private subnet. Again, we're using auto assign public IP addresses, use the subnet setting, and it actually tells us in here that it's disabled, so we won't get a public IP address in this subnet. And then I'm just going to leave everything else as is. Go ahead and hit next. We're not going to do a bootstrap script for this because it won't work anyway. Well, it would work, but if we're trying to apply a yum update, it's not going to have an internet connection out because it is in a private subnet. Go ahead and hit next, and I'm going to call this, let's call it my DB or my SQL server. So MySQL server. So this would be our pretend, let's say, MySQL server. Go ahead and hit next. I'm going to create a new security group just for this, and we're going to call it like my RDS security group, or SG, might be easier. And then I'm going to go ahead and paste in that as the description. And then so in terms of the rules, we're going to want SSH into this through this security group. We're also going to want MySQL, so we'll put in here. And then in here, we're going to specify our CIDR address range. So it was 10.0.1.0, and then it was /24. So anything in that block range will be allowed to use the MySQL port. We'll also do that for SSH. So we'll lock SSH down just to EC2 instances within this block range. And then I'm just going to add another rule. I'm going to allow ICMP traffic. So I'm going to basically ICMP traffic will allow me to ping this EC2 instance from our public subnet. So I'm going to go in here and do all ICMP, and again, I'm going to specify that it's allowed through our public subnet. Now, if you remember from the very first introductory lecture, security groups are stateful, which means that when we basically allow these rules, outbound traffic is also allowed by default. So if we allow inbound traffic for SSH or for MySQL or for ICMP, outbound traffic will automatically be allowed out as well. Okay, so I'm happy with all the rules in this security group. I'm going to go ahead and hit review and launch. And now I'm going to go ahead and launch my EC2 instance. I'm going to use my private key, which is my German key, and that is now launching. We can go ahead and view our instances in here, and we can see it's called MySQL server. Now, there's not a lot that we're going to be able to do with this server from the console, simply because it's not going to have a public IP address. I'm just going to pause the video here and wait for it to launch. Okay, so I have if that has now launched, so we've got MySQL server here. You can see it doesn't have a public IP address. We do have a private IP address down here though, so it's 10.0.2.156, and you're going to need to make a note of your private IP address. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to SSH into my web server. So just need to make a note of the public IP address. So I'm going to copy that over. So here I am in my SSH directory. We can see my private key here, which is my German key. If it's a brand new one that you guys have just created, remember to chmod 0600 to my German key. That will make sure the permissions are correct on it. And then what you might want to do is you might just want to open it up. So nano and whatever your key name is, and then just copy and paste this key into your clipboard because you're going to need it later on. So going to copy that in and then just exit, and then I'm going to SSH and then EC2-user and then @ and then I'm going to type in my public IP address, which is 54.93.120 and then 28. And then I'm going to do -i and then my German key pair. And so there we go. It's asking me if I want to connect, hit yes. And so now I've SSH'd into my EC2 instance, which is sitting inside my public subnet. So what I'm going to do is just elevate my privileges to root. I'm going to clear the screen. And now what I want to do, first of all, is I want to see if I can ping my server that's sitting inside my private subnet. So to do that, I just type in ping and then the private IP address. So for me, it was 10.0.2.156 and hit enter. and there you go, you can see the ping happening automatically. Now if I wanted to stop this ping, I just Alt-tab back over to my browser. I could go into, let's go back over here, go into my VPCs, and then go into my security group, and we could grab the RDS security group and go to the inbound rules, and we could just delete all ICMP and hit save, and then straight away that should break the ping. And then interestingly, it doesn't actually break the ping because the connection's already been established. But if I hit cancel and then hit up and try and ping it again, you'll see that I'm no longer able to ping. So it did take effect immediately, but because the ping connection was already established, basically I have to break that connection and then try to re-ping it to get it through the security group. So let's go back and just quickly add in, I'll just cancel this out. I'm just going to quickly add ICMP traffic back to my RDS security group. So just go in here, go edit, add another rule, ICMP traffic, and then my address range. I'll just copy and paste this in and paste it in there and hit save. And if I go back to my EC2 instance, again, I should just be able to go up and start pinging, and there we go, it's pinging it again. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to clear the screen, and I'm going to create a new document, and this is going to be our private key, which we're going to use to get into our database server. So I'm going to call it nano, and I'm going to call it my German key pair.pem. And then all I want to do is paste in the contents of my private key, which I had saved locally. So paste that in there, hit Control X, hit enter, and yes, and then we're going to save it, and then I'm just going to chmod it, so 0600 my lowercase my German key pair. So there we go. So now I should in theory be able to SSH EC2 - user and then and then we need to use the the private IP address, so 10.0.2. And for me it was 156, yours will obviously be different. And then we want to do -i and then my German key pair.pem. And there we go, it's saying do we want to connect, hit yes, and now we are inside our EC2 instance, which is in our private subnet. So I'm going to clear the screen, I'm going to elevate my privileges to root. Let's do a yum update. So let's just try and do a yum update -yes. So we want to apply all our security patches to this EC2 instance in our private subnet. And you can see nothing is happening, and the reason for that is because it does not have a route out to the internet. This EC2 instance can basically only talk to other EC2 instances within my public subnet, and it can only talk over the ports that I've allowed it, so through ICCMP, through port 80, and through port 22, which is the SSH port. So this, right now this EC2 instance is pretty useless to me because I can't even install MySQL on it. So what's the, how do we solve that? The way we solve that is by using NAT instances or NAT gateways, and they're called Network Address Translation. That's what NAT stands for. So in the next lecture, we're going to look at how we can deploy a NAT gateway into our custom VPC, and then we're going to look at how we can apply our security patches and install MySQL on this EC2 instance. So if you've got the time, join me in the next lecture. Thank you.